ask me, why didn't I wait until Final Destination Bloodlines to do this retrospective? That's simple. I didn't want to. These movies are immense gore fests. And these type of movies are bad with gore. Like, well, let me just explain. Development began with Jeffrey Redrick, where the original idea was written as a spec for the X-Files. Until New Line Cinema entered the picture, where New Line Cinema decided to turn this into a horror movie. Which is okay. The director was already attached. James Wong. With Glenn Morgan and Jeff Wong already on the picture, it was time to begin. The cast was immediately filled out with Devon Sawa, I Later, Ken Smith, and Kristen Schaff getting already cast as the main leads. Already, as more of the supporting cast was filled up in the early months of the year, in the early months of 1999, the cast was immediately all narrowed down. Where after the late great Tony Todd was cast in an undisclosed role, Tony Todd was no stranger to horror, as he did play the Candyman at one point. But this would be his role sort of as a main player. As the Long Island planes began to actually be used for the movie's opening kill. Yep, Long Island was used for the airport. The airport that would be for the opening kill. Right after in 1999, a first teaser was released. But it all led to March 17th, 2000, where finally audiences could journey to theaters for this new take on horror. Final Destination is a gore fest. This is the type of horror movie that would make someone sick to their stomach. And I gotta say, if I saw this movie, I would feel sick to my stomach because of all the gore this movie has. Now here's the thing. I was going to do the fifth movie first. Because the fifth Final Destination is actually a prequel. But I decided not to. But the box office was favorable. Rotten Tomatoes scores were negative, but the box office aside, but with the box office pretty solid, a sequel was already greenlit. But here's the thing. James Wong did not return. Instead, David R. Ellis was made a director. And since we know that Alex died in the first movie, we need a new set of victims. And we did get new sets of victims. With Allie Ladder cast as the main protagonist for the sequel. And as the main protagonist. But finally the day arrived, January 31st, 2003, where audiences could journey to theaters to witness the next in the Final Destination franchise. So right after we got a plane crash, was our next death-defying stunt. Well, it's a truck. Pretty lame if you ask me. It's a little bit of a different idea than Final Destination went for in the second movie. But this movie was more positive with Rotten Tomatoes scores, getting a solid 52%. But even though box office was low, there was talks for a third installment. And we already know how these movies work. Main protagonist of the first movie died, so now we need a new set of meat. So now we need some fresh meat. So now Death needs some fresh meat to kill off. Well, this is where Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Ryan Merlin, Chris Lemons, Aaron Umar, Jason Wise, and Carrie Dreyer were brought in. To be some fresh kills for us to get this time around. As filming immediately began. But here's the thing. This new death-defying stunt we've already seen the dangers of driving into a truck. But what danger could we look at this time around? Well, a fear that everyone has if you're someone who hates heights. A roller coaster. The perfect opening kill for a movie like this. But after the ending to Final Destination 3 got some negative test screenings, the director James Wan decided to go back and recreate the ending. Which all led to the theatrical poster showing a roller coaster. Where finally the day arrived, February 10th, 2006. Where audiences could journey to theaters for the third in the Final Destination saga. Alright, I for one have no problems with this one. The opening kill is pretty solid. The opening kill on the roller coaster is pretty solid. Even though the opening roller coaster death is first a premonition, but then happens. I didn't explain the rules for the Final Destination franchise. You can escape death in this franchise by saving someone or killing someone. But, that doesn't save you for very long. Death comes for you all eventually in this franchise. And death proved it. But the movie did well at the box office. A solid box office just hinted that Final Destination would continue on. But but now for the real question. What was the Rotten Tomatoes score? Oh. In a direct contrast to the original that got a 40%, Final Destination 3 got a 44%. Even though its box office was pretty solid, this made the cast and crew behind the Final Destination 3 to wonder if another film would be possible. Well, after the main success of Avatar in 2009, it was made official. Final Destination would release their final 2 films in 3D. And this was after the massive success of Avatar, so, Now, James Wong was supposed to direct, but he was busy with one of the worst movies of his career, Dragon Ball Evolution. So sadly, James Wong would not return to the director's chair. Instead, David R. Ellis was back, returning to Final Destination after Final Destination 2. And with that, the cast was consisted of Bobby Campo, Ben Stellan, and Nick Zano as our main leads, all leading to filming of the opening kill. On a speedway? Oh. This would include a race car kill. I'm interested. But finally, as filming immediately wrapped, audiences got their first look at Final Destination for the Final Destination in the form of a teaser trailer. But finally, the day arrived, August 28th, 2009, where audiences could journey to theaters for the beginning of the 3D boom that happened after Avatar. Wait a minute, did Avatar come out before or after this film? I will be doing actually a retrospective on, oh no, this came out Christmas 2009, so this came out after this film. Oh yeah, after an Avatar Fire and Ash comes out, I will do an original trilogy retrospective for Avatar, and then after the next films come out, I will do a retrospective on those. The box office was, This proved that this film was the stinker of the Final Destination franchise, with $187 million at the box office. And oh my. Maybe this is the end for Final Destination. Nope. But don't worry, it isn't. We still have one more film to go. Which, in order to do this, I'm gonna have to do something. Final Destination 5 is a prequel. I was gonna put Final Destination 5 at the beginning of this, but I decided not to. Stephen Quaid was pegged as the director. And as filming came to an abrupt beginning, audiences wondered, when would we see some footage? Well, Final Destination 5 finally made its presence known on May 9th, 2011, where finally a full theatrical trailer was released online. Clocking in at 2 minutes and 9 seconds, this trailer proved that Final Destination was aiming for a big release when it hit theaters in August 2011. But Final Destination continued to heat up, because in July of 2011, a full theatrical poster was released online, showing a skull with 3 steel beams in it, hinting that this kill would involve something to do with steel girders, maybe. Which does give us hints from filming, because this movie filmed on a bridge for its opening disaster. But one of the biggest shocks as it returned to the original airfield. The original place where the original Final Destination filmed all those years ago in 2000. But why? Well, audiences wouldn't have to wait long because as the final marketing push heated up, with new posters and new TV spots released online, all to build to the August 12th release. But finally, the day arrived, August 12th, 2011, where finally audiences could journey to theaters for the last of the Final Destination saga. The opening kill is pretty solid. Well, the premonition is, but then this is where the movie drops. Literally. There is that death from the original, so we get that in spades. But after the third act with the villain gets taken down, the main protagonist and his girlfriend are on a flight to Paris? Oh no. Because guess who's back? Everyone's favorite cuckoo nut, Alex, is back. Uh-oh. We know what this means. This movie has caught up with the original Final Destination. As Devon Sawa, who played Alex Burrowing, is back. Almost all of the original cast look like they've returned. But wait, why? Why is this happening? Well, they're on Flight 180. The opening accident from the original Final Destination. as we find out that Sam and Molly are on the original Flight 180. As there's engine trouble, we know what happens next. The plane slowly tears itself apart. Now, this is where the movie cuts a premonition. Of course it does. But here's where it gets good. Because the next kill, once Alex and the others are escorted off the plane as in the original, the plane then takes off and tears itself apart, giving us the same premonition deaths we got in the original. With instead of Alex getting incinerated, it's Sam who gets incinerated in the plane. Very cheeky, Final F5. Very cheeky. Very cheeky, FD5. Very cheeky. Well, the box office was good, but that doesn't matter. What about Rotten Tomatoes? Huh! Better than the original. Yes, the movie did better than the original. But with no new Final Destination films rumored, what would come next? Well, sadly, we would have to wait a while. But finally, Final Destination will return this year. Because on May 18th, Final Destination will return. Two trailers were already released online. The first looks like the first one looked like a scene from the movie. But the second trailer was scary. Showing the opening accident that I'm predicting is the opening accident. A death-defying accident on the Seattle Space Needle. Yep, the Space Needle is going to be the accident for this film. Showing that they're doing something that hasn't been done before. Fears of heights. Final Destination has done some high-up kills. But speaking of which, it's time to rank the Final Destination kills, baby! Yeah! Alright, bottom tier. The truck accident. Sadly, the truck accident is not my favorite. This one's pretty simple, so it can be rated lower. The Devil's Ride. Good death, bad execution. Good kills, bad execution. The Bridge Accident. Another case where it's like the third movie. Good kills, not so great execution on Death's part. The NASCAR Speedway Accident. Perfect. Solid 10 out of 10. And finally, the Flight 180 crash. This scene is perfect. Both this version and the one from the 2011 prequel are both standouts. I will return to Final Destination at least to wrap up our journey with Final Destination Bloodlines. But this is where I'll end this retrospective, and I almost have the Snow White roast out of the copyright gauntlet. I basically had a Final Destination premonition about the copyright gauntlet, so I knew that that Snow White would end up in the copyright gauntlet. So yeah, the Snow White roast should come out, I'm hoping, on Monday. If everything goes right, the Snow White roast should come out on Monday. if nothing goes wrong. But this is all for this video, and until then, I'll see you guys later.